Hey, this is Carrie with Canary Quilts, and we are on week 20 of our Dear Jane Quilt Along. A lot of you are familiar with this by now. We're almost halfway through, making great progress. That's all I can say. We are making great progress. This has been a real education in using EQ8 and modifying some blocks to make it easier, and working with small blocks, working with appliques, foundation paper piecing. So you got a lot of it in this quilt. This week, I don't know if you saw last week, but last week there was a doozy of a change. This week it's a little bit easier. Not much going on with this week. So hit the subscribe button, notification bell if you want to follow along with me on this quilt along. If you want to learn some EQ8 stuff, I have the links for EQ8 in the Dear Jane EQ8 add-on down below. If you have the book, you can probably follow along too. You can use the hashtag Dear Jane QAL if you want to share your blocks on social media, and I'll find them that way and I'll share them on my page or tag at Canary Quilts. Also, one more thing is if you don't want to go through the EQ8 stuff, I have the time codes for all the block constructions in the description below this video if you want to head down there and just go to those. All right. So this shouldn't take too long with the blocks here on EQ8. I'm going to populate my color chart. These are the colors I chose for this week. So let's go ahead and populate my color chart, and then we'll quickly go through which blocks I'm using. All right, so I need to set a block. I need to find my blocks way back here. And we are starting with B7, and I am using variation 2. So there's B7. I12 is I12 right there. M8 there. M13 variation 2. And then RS7. And I've got to rotate that so it fits. Okay, that's what my color chart's looking like. It's looking really cool. I say that every week, but it's looking really cool. It's kind of representative of the colors that I'm using. So let's go over to the block library and see which blocks I'm working on. All right, this is B7 World Series. I am using variation 2, and the reason I'm using variation 2 is because this is what the applique looks like. I'm going to be using one background piece, and then these corner pieces and then these petals, or whatever you want to call them right here, are their own appliques. So that I think the other ones were different. It might have, I'm not real sure, I don't remember, but this one just looked the easiest to me to lay out, and I won't have double applique or applique laying on each other, and I won't be piecing this together. I don't want to piece this. So that's why I chose variation 2. All right, next is I12 Fred Square, and this is going to be pretty simple. It's the foundation paper pieces, as you can see. Sections look great, so it's not going to be too hard to put together. We got some little sections right here, like right here and right here, that we'll have to put together, but hey, we've done that. After all we've done so far, that shouldn't be any problem at all. All right, here's M8 Enchanted Square, another paper piece that looks pretty straightforward. So each outer border here is paper piece, and then each of these are stripped out in the middle, paper pieced. So I'm looking forward to that one. That one looks fun. All right, next I am doing M13 Lynette's Diamond Variation 2. This is an applique variation. You can see I will have 2 appliques on top of each other, but that's not what I'm going to do. I'm going to use this template that's in the middle. I'm going to draw it out on this outer template here and then cut it out so that I'll have one big background piece, and then this middle piece will also be background, so that I don't have applique on applique. So that's all I'm doing with that one. There's nothing to change in EQ8, and I'll show you how I do that when I get to it. And then RS7 Fedelia's Heart is mostly applique, except for right down here, this bottom border will be foundation paper pieced. So you can see that down here. They show it as all one section. You can put together the bottom and then add this whole piece to the top of it. And then we can come over to templates And that's where we'll print out all our heart templates. We won't need anything else on here but the heart templates. So very quiet week this week. I'll take it after last week. So let's get started on our blocks, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button, notification bell, so you'll get notified every time I put out Dear Jane content and all the other fun stuff we got going on. We're on to week 20 of our Dear Jane Quilt Along. And our first block this week is B7 World Series. This is what it looks like for Dear Jane. I'm actually doing variation 2 because it's an applique variation. So the applique is the dark piece is the background. I've got my 5-inch square cut. And then these are the pieces that are in the corner. And then this is the piece that causes or creates the circle. One thing to note about this piece is it's not symmetrical. This kind of comes up higher on this side than it does on this side, and that's what's on top here. So I've marked it on my pieces down here that you can call it top or the outside, I guess, but it's the outside of these pieces. To lay these out, I think the way I'm going to approach it is find my 1/4 of an inch in from the corner, and then I have creased this piece down the diagonals and come in 1/4 of an inch, put my corner piece in so that both points line up on the 1/4 of an inch, and then use those points to lay these petal pieces down. That's how I'm going to approach it. I may change the way I do it, but that's how I'm going to approach it right now. So I'm going to get my pieces cut out. Like I said, I've already creased this, and then we'll start laying them down and see how it goes. I got my pieces cut out, and I made these marks 1/4 of an inch in, basically from the top and from the side, along this diagonal crease that I made. It's really hard to see, even for me. So when I laid my corner piece down, I put the point here on the mark, and then I put this point on the crease. And I did that for all 4 pieces here. And then what I'm doing is I'm taking this piece and I'm making sure this is the top or the outside. And if you can see, it falls about on this 1/4 inch. I've got it laid out. Falls about on this 1/4 inch mark right here. So I'm lining it up with this point and making sure it's lined up with this 1/4 of an inch along here so that it ends up straight. All right, so my last piece on. This is my top. I'm going to lay this over here. Need to come over a little. That needs to come down a little. This is probably going to be the hardest one. The last one's probably going to be the hardest one to put on. All right. So that looks pretty good. What I'm going to do here is actually move this one down so it's touching. I'm going to put it on the crease. And it hits that mark up there. All right, there it is, 1/4 of an inch away from the outside so it doesn't get sewn in. And then this looks, to me, it looks pretty symmetrical. Looks pretty good for just laying it down. But that's kind of what I was doing. I was kind of lining it up here. Let me get a ruler. Not that is long enough. You know, along that 1/4 of an inch, at least for me, it's this 1/4 of an inch on my board. And making sure my points are pretty much lined up. And I was eyeballing it, but it worked out. All right, there we go. That is B7 World Series. Pretty easy. Variation 2, the applique version. Next up is Fred's Square Fair, I12. Now, this is a lot of pieces. It's just going to take some time, but it's pretty much exactly the same thing throughout. We have these small areas that are the same in all of these pieces here. And then we've got a big triangle and a square to add to it in certain places. So I don't think it's going to be too hard. I have my cut pieces on my website. You can find that link in the description down below if you want to use them. This square, this white square is in the middle. These are the outside squares here. The colors, these are the big triangles. These are the little triangles we have, and these are all the little white triangles we have, and we have a lot of them. So let's see, let's put together one of these, and that'll pretty much represent the whole thing. I went ahead and put these together to make sure my pieces were good. And they are plenty big. So that's what they look like. They went together real easy. I kind of didn't really chain piece them, but I did all the same at once. I did 1 and 2 at once, and then I did all the 3s and then all the 4s, because all these corners are the same. So this is the piece I'm going to put together. This is the mirror image of it. And what I'm doing is I'm changing this piece to 2 and this piece to 4. So this was 4 and this was 2, and I'm swapping them out. There's no intersecting seams, so I can do that. I've drawn it out on this side. Let's turn it over. So I'm going to start with my 2 small triangles. One is dark and one is light. And the dark is the first piece. And that's right there. And I want to overlap number 2 by 1/4 inch. And you can see these are plenty big. Sometimes they don't look big enough when I'm cutting them, but they are. 1/4 inch over 2. And then we'll sew right here. Lock stitch there. There's my first 2 pieces. I went ahead and trimmed between 1 and 3 right there. So we need a white triangle. And you can see the triangle needs to be oriented like this. So these are plenty big, so you can overlap quite a bit. I'm just going to line it up with this corner over here. And then we will sew on this tiny little line right here, lock stitching at each end. Okay, there's my white triangle. Yeah, this one was added. So now we're going to add the other one over here, G4. And I've already trimmed my 1/4 inch. We want it to be oriented like that. So I am just going to line it up with the edge of my paper. And sew right along this line. You can come off the paper and lock stitch right there. There we go. There's the corner of one of our flying goose units there. All right, G5 is the square here, and I trimmed my 1/4 inch. Getting ready for the square. I'm going to line it up on my seam allowance, and then there's my seam allowance. It needs to come out here. So we're doing good on that piece too. So we can just draw or sew along that line in between everything. There's my square, and you can't see any of the lines I drew, so we got plenty of coverage. Now we're ready to put our last triangle on. I trimmed my 1/4 inch, orient it like that, so we need to put it on this way, and it's off the paper on both edges, so we're doing good there. So now we can sew right along that line right there. And there we go. You know what? I was saying this is a mirror image, and it was not. It is the same. Anyway, all of these pieces over here are some version of that. So I am going to get all my pieces trimmed up, and we'll get them laid out to put together. We got a lot of sections here, but I don't think it's going to be too hard, because we basically over here in the block, we've just got these 4 flying geese and these patchwork corners. So that's all we need to build. Now this is the center block, and so this needs another corner. So we can start there. Let's see, a corner needs to go over here. And then we can do this to complete this side. And we could do this to complete this side. So now we have rows. And nope. We have rows like this. What was I thinking? All right, there's a row. We have the 4 patch corners, and then our other flying geese unit right here. So now this makes up the center row. All right, I'm going to add the corners on to the center. I'm going to put these 2 together,
and then we'll come back and take a look at it before we put the rows together. Here's my 3 rows put together. As I was putting these corners on, I decided to iron towards the large triangle because that's how it is on the other side. It's ironed towards it. So I decided this side would be too. So that's how I did all of those. And then I added this bottom piece right here and I ironed towards the center piece. So now we can put our pieces together, and we sort of kind of do have nesting seams, but it's just a straight seam. I'm going to get this sewn up, and then let's see, I think I will, let's see how it works ironing this open. Here we go, I12 Fred's Square Fair. That's what Dear Jane's looks like, and that's what mine looks like. That's pretty cool. Not too hard. I need to find a different phrase. Fairly easy to put together. Just a little tedious. Up next is M8 Enchanted Square. This is what it's going to look like when it's done. And these are my pieces that I have. Let's see. For our white pieces, we have a lot of these rectangles, which are going to be all the way around the outside and on the... Wait, these will be on the inside for these short ones, but the long ones are all on the outside. The square are these 4 squares right here. Next is the dark pieces, the larger triangles. You can see them all in here. And then these small triangles are right here in these corners. They're pretty tiny. The rectangle, there's one that's in the middle, and then there's some little rectangles right there. So it's pretty straightforward, but I do have my cut pieces out on my website, and you can find the link in the description down below to those cut sizes. So, well, let's see. I want to do one of these pieces because I'm pretty sure we're going to have to figure out how to cut these so they fit. And these are pretty straightforward, so let's do one of these pieces. I'm going to start with this piece here. I put these 3 pieces together so I can figure out how to do it, because sometimes these are the hardest pieces to figure out. We have 1, 2, and 3, so we need these 2, and we need one of these. And I've drawn out the 2 seams on the back. So the first one's pretty easy. So the edges of the paper are basically the seam allowance lines. I want to lay this here so that I'm plenty over the point there. I'm going to take a pin and I'm going to pin it back here in place. I'm going to turn it back over and I'm going to go between 1 and 2 and trim. We usually don't do this part on the first 2 pieces, but on this one we are. So we can get that seam allowance figured out. All right, there we go. Now we're going to take our triangle, and it's plenty big, so I've just been, I mean, it's so big you could probably take it right off the paper, but just kind of centering it on there. And I'm going to sew right here between 1 and 2. And then I'll come back and show you how I do number 3. There's my first 2 pieces, and I have gone ahead and trimmed my 1/4 of an inch between 2 and 3. So what I need to do, and this is the way I've been doing it, and this is how I usually do it, I'm just going to lay this piece over top of it. It's plenty over the center point, and it's off the paper. I'm going to pin it in place for now, just to keep it in place. There we go. You might be able to see my dark piece underneath there. I need to go 1/4 of an inch past where I can see my dark piece. I need to create the seam allowance out here. So I can see my dark runs right there. I'm going to use my 1/4 of an inch and I'm going to put it right on that dark piece at 1/4 of an inch. And I'm going to make a mark. That's going to be my cutting line. All right. It happens to actually fall right in the corner. I didn't plan that. It's just how I laid it. So I'm going to cut along this piece so that when I flip it over, I'll line up this seam allowance with this seam allowance. So that when we sew it along here and flip it, it'll flip in this direction. All right, let's turn this over. So here's my seam allowance here and here. I've got a large tail up here, so that should mean that I should fall, when it gets flipped, it should fall in that seam allowance right there. So now I'm going to sew on the line between 2 and 3. There we go. So I probably could have moved my piece up a little more, but I am on that seam allowance up here and I'm well over it down here. So looks a little janky right now, but it will cut out just fine. All right, those are probably some of the hardest pieces for paper piecing to figure out how to put together. Here's the piece I'm going to demonstrate. It's exactly like this piece, and there are elements in these pieces that are like this one. So I have put these together. All my pieces are, the cut pieces are good sizes, so don't forget you can find those on my website at the link down below this video. All right, we have 1, 2, 3, and 4. I have my pieces up here that I need. I've drawn it out on the back. These are my seam lines. The edge of the paper is basically seam allowance. So my first piece is this little triangle, and my second piece is this, I guess I have a square left, but it'll work. So I'm going to turn it over this way. It's going to be easier to hold. I want my triangle to go over top of my number 2. By 1/4 of an inch. It's pretty much lined up with the paper, so I'm good. This is plenty big. Just going to line it up. And you can sew right here on the line between 1 and 2. First 2 pieces are on. I have trimmed between 2 and 3, my 1/4 of an inch. We're going to take one of our triangles, and let's see, it needs to be oriented like that. So I'm just going to line it up here. My actual seam allowance is right there, so I'm plenty over on both edges. And we're going to sew right here between 2 and 3. There's my first 3 pieces. This 4th piece right here is going to be exactly like 3. We're going to orient our triangle like that, flip it over, make sure we have plenty of coverage, and we do. We're going to sew on the line between D4 and D2, and then I'm going to get all my pieces trimmed, and we'll put this little puzzle together. There's my pieces all trimmed up. Not too much of a puzzle to put together. We have 2 outside strips that are the same size, so they're going to go opposite each other, and same with the long. This one is going to go right in the middle, and then these 2 fit next to it, and then these 2 fit in the corner. So I'm going to get this center square done. It looks to me like these seams will nest each other, which is great. And these seams don't. That's not a problem. But I'll get things lined up either using seams or notches. There we go. There's the center square. I actually iron towards this center strip and then towards the corners. I don't know that it really matters a lot. But anyway, I'm going to add the 2 short strips on. And I will probably iron towards these short strips. And then I'm going to add the long strips on and iron towards the long strips. There's my M8 Enchanted square. Went together pretty good. I enjoyed it. Even the difficult strips on the side. We're on to M13 Lynette's Diamond Variation 2. This is a applique variation. I have my background square ready to go. What I'm going to do is cut this one out on the sewing line. And I'm going to put it inside this, mark it up, and then cut it out that way. So then I will have what I need for my fusible webbing. I got the right block over here. That's what it's going to look like when it's done. What I've done is I've cut these out on the sewing lines. I folded them. I used the points on this one and folded it and found the center. And then the same with this, I found the center. So I'm going to use my pin, put it through the center of that. Use my pin and put it through the center of this. Straighten it up. Go take the pin out. All right. am going to use this to draw my square. There we go. That's what I'm going to want to cut out. All right, there is my transfer onto my fusible webbing. I put it on my fabric. I need to cut it out, and I'm also going to cut the center out of it also. There's my applique cut out, and I creased the background. It is hard to see, but I want to line my points up with that crease, and that should center it, you know, taking care that I have a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance on the outside. So now I can peel the paper off and do the best I can here to line up these points with the creases that I made. And there we go. I'm going to get this ironed down and we'll be done with M13 Lynette's Diamond Variation 2, the applique variation. We're on RS7 Fedelia's Hearts. This is what it's going to look like. You can see we have 2 hearts in a row coming up. So here's my heart appliques, and I have put those onto my fabric, and we have the foundation paper piecing back here, which should be pretty easy to put together. Here's for the large section, and then these are for the triangles down here. So I'm going to get this done, and then we'll put our applique on. It's going to probably be pretty quick. I'm set up here to start my foundation paper piecing. I've marked it on the back. Our first piece is going to be a light. Our second piece is going to be a dark. So let's layer them that way. And we just need to make sure my light is on the bottom. I'm a 1/4 of an inch over all seams. My seam allowance is out here. I'm over this seam, so I'm good there. And so on the line between 1 and 2. There's my first 2 pieces. I have trimmed for my third, which is going to be a white. I'm just going to line it up so that I'm above this. You can see my fabric here. Above this seam allowance, here's my, this is a seam allowance down here. So I'm just going to get these sewn on. They're plenty big, and I'm going to keep zigzagging these till I get to the end. So still on the line between A2 and A3. There we go. There's the foundation paper piece put together. I have already trimmed my 1/4 of an inch along this seam. And now I'm just going to add the large white or light piece I have. And these are my seam allowances, and my fabric is well over those. So I am going to sew on the seam here and fold it over or iron it over, and then I'm going to trim this whole piece up. I've cut my background out, and then I folded it in half, and so I have a crease that goes right up the middle here. And that's how I'm laying my hearts out. I haven't pulled the fusible backing off yet, but I'm going to lay these 2 hearts so they butt up against that crease. This heart is going to have this part of the heart and the point of the heart on the crease, and the same with these 2. And they're going to looks like it's going to almost butt up against the hearts that are next to it. So, I mean, that's how I'm doing it. So, pretty easy way to figure out how to lay these out and maintain your 1/4 of an inch around the outside of the block. So I'm going to get the backing pulled off and get these fused down. There we go. R7 Fedelia's Hearts. Very pretty. I like my dark color against that light background. Turned out really nice. I like all the blocks this week. They were pretty fun. 2 appliques, 2 foundation paper pieces, and then a combination of both right here. All right, that was a fun week to put together. We had a couple appliques, which turned out really cool, not too hard to put together. That's always fun. These paper pieces were fun. They turned out really cool looking. And then our hearts, which was another fun one to do. We have another heart one to do next week. So let me know how it's going for you. Let me know if you did the same variations as I did. And I love to hear from you. So let's get my quilt
photo quilt populated. I love doing this. It kind of gives me an idea what it's going to look like in the end, but you know, it's going to be different because look at all these pictures look really different. So let's start with B7 World Series and I12. Oh my gosh, we got almost all the I's done. We have an M8 and an M13. And then we have our right side 7. So I think I said right side 8 would be halfway. Oh my gosh. Anyway, if you're following along, at the end of May, I just totally missed it when I was scheduling this out, so I didn't schedule anything. So what I think I'm going to do on the last Friday of May is go through all the sashing and pieces like that, just to let you know what's coming up, how many we will need, and all that kind of fun stuff, just to give us a break from doing blocks, I guess. I guess I might have inadvertently done that, but I didn't mean to. But anyway, we'll have a little break from doing blocks, and I'll go through all the sashing and all that other fun stuff. So we'll be ready for the end of this quilt. But anyway, hit the subscribe button, notification bell. You get notified of all the Dear Jane content and all the other fun stuff we got going on here. So I'll see you in the next video. Bye.